Hi there, everyone. Listen to this for just a minute. Tell me what you think.
Delaware is on the brink of passing a regulation that would allow children to change their gender without parental permission or even knowledge. Regulation 225 would order all schools to let kids pick their bathroom, locker room, sports team, preferred name, regardless of their biological gender. The regulation would also let students choose their own race, and if the school wishes, parents will be told nothing. Mark Purpura is president of Equality Delaware Foundation, and he joins us today. Mark, thanks for coming on.
Here's a few problems with this. Now, aside from the obvious of what you just heard, unless you agree with these states allowing teenagers to decide their gender and decide what race they are. And we are also, I'm sure you've heard, children are now wanting to identify as a different gender. If children can actually make this decision, then we should start voting for them for President of the United States. Our first child president, or maybe we've actually already had our first child president. But there's a lot of things we know about children. They get emotional. If they don't get their way, they can go into a corner. We let them have temper tantrums. Sometimes we just let them scream it out. They want to take, when you give them something, you give a group of children something, one child wants to take all of it. Like candy's not in anymore. I can't say candy because that's bad. It's bad. All the fruit. One child will want to take all the fruit. And it's very natural for a child to do. But there are things that children, it's why they're children. Something so huge as changing genders and changing race. That's a whole nother problem if you change your race, because I think that's really, that's the funniest part of this whole discussion. In fact, I think we probably should, let's get to the funny part first. I think we should let everybody choose their own race. I think the left should just have their way, and everybody should just decide. It's like whatever the group du jour, they seem to prefer illegal aliens over American citizens, even more so than Hispanic citizens and African American citizens. So you can choose to be an illegal alien of Mexican descent, or Mexican, or in El Salvador, Guatemala, whatever it is, and then you have that right and get all the benefits and the affirmative action. Because when the illegal aliens become citizens, they will have affirmative action, and they will take their place in front of, let's say, a group that is still struggling now. This country has not really given them the best education, partly due to the fact that their cities are run for 60 years by Democrats. It's that's the ones who are actually at fault, are the ones who have been running their governments. And that's the reason why they've been struggling. That's one of the reasons why they've been struggling so much. So if you just decide, a white person of German descent, just decides, as a child, I decided I was, the opposite gender than what I was born as. And I decided that I was Mexican and came here as a dreamer. You give them the race, you're going to give them also the status as well. I came here when I decided I was a child, and I disowned my parents. I decided, since my parents are not Mexican, they're not my parents. I identify with Mexico, and that's where I get. So people who are actually Mexican, and okay, or it's their turn to be in the front of the line, so they get in front of the line. They're no longer in front of the line because you've got a Mexican person, a person who identifies as a Mexican dreamer, a legal alien Mexican dreamer who's also a transgender. They're going to get right in front of the line, in front of all the other people who are actually dreamers, the Mexicans who came here 30 years ago and have been working and have been working and not committing any crimes. There are those, and the people, African Americans, who are actually here basically as long as we've been here, because they came over, right? England had a colony in Jamestown, and that's when the first slaves were in Jamestown. But there was an African American in Florida that's actually born in 1606, born free. This might cause trouble for people of African descent, people who identify, who really are dreamers. I mean, so let's say you care about the dreamers, you're on the left, care about the dreamers. If you allow this whole thing to pervade, this whole gender, picking our race thing, it's going to cause a lot of problems. And, aside from the fact that the child's brain is not developed, that the amygdala is that's why teens and children, they're so emotional, and then they do something, they think it's the end of the world. Something happens, they don't get it, it's the end of the world. That's why teens are more susceptible to suicide. And of course, when they go through their hormonal changes in their preteens, 12, 13 years old, that's when those hormonal changes happen. And so you've got an amygdala, that's your emotional brain, that's larger than your prefrontal cortex, which is the rational part of the brain. That's what's, in adults, that's what's larger. That's why we can, usually adults are the ones that kind of guide children along. One moment, something might seem like the end of the world, and somehow when the emotions lessen, all of a sudden you just kind of move past that depression. Some people who end up committing suicide, sometimes if they give it a little time, what seems very bleak, like the change in seasons. New England, we have seasonal affective disorder, because the winter goes on too long, or that's in April is usually when the most suicides occur, is because winter's been going on for so long and everything is so gray and the skies are so gray and you just can't take it, and if you just let a little time pass, then you see those little blossoms popping out of the dirt. And I usually go and I love to touch the little snowdrops, or the little green daffodils and tulips that popping out of the soil. And it's like, oh, that's it. Spring is coming. And so that there's hope. But if you are left in that, if you're a teen or even an adult, when emotion overcomes you, you can't see the forest of the trees. And sometimes when a little bit of time passes, you just give it, you just get through it, no matter how emotionally bad it feels. All of a sudden, the day turns, the next day comes, and it's, the sun will come out tomorrow. Remember that song from Annie? No, don't think of Annie. Don't think of Annie. Oh my God. I can't believe I listened to that one as a little girl. Oh my God. Anyway, so the complaint is that children should pick their genders because they might, and the teachers should decide this, and they might go home and they might be subject to physical or emotional abuse if the parents don't allow them to change their gender. And, if the parents are abusive, the school should be picking up on that, whether the child wants to change their gender or not, because there's a lot of children who suffer, usually children who act out, children who don't, children who become loners, or ones that get bullied are usually the ones that are abused at home because they don't have a parent to stand up for them. The parent doesn't come down to the school and say, that's it, or you just tell the kid, you know what, you don't deserve this. This person is completely in the wrong. You're not who these children who are bullied are usually the ones that are abused at home. Usually that thing is coupled together. Since the brain is still growing until the age of 26 and the rational prefrontal cortex is not developed, when the child, if you start giving hormones to a child, the child will never go through puberty. And the child never goes through puberty. If the child really does, when they grow up and they really do want to change their sex, they're not able to, because the genitals are not developed properly. So parents who do this is actually terribly abusive. And if the child really, I think it's 0.0000001% of the entire population. It's a very, very, very small amount. But if you do have a child that really feels that they need to change, do not give them hormones when they're a child. If they really want to play with dolls, let them play with dolls. Sometimes it's a phase that they just go through. My own nephew, when he was very young, he couldn't, I think it has something to do with being breastfed. You're very close to the mother. The child's very close to a mother in a way that they're not with the father. It's because they're born of the mother and the breastfeeding and all that stuff. And I just kept telling him that you're a boy, and he goes, girl, no, you're a boy, girl, because he felt he was a girl like his mother, because he couldn't differentiate between the two bodies, as if he was still attached. And she did an awful lot of breastfeeding. He liked a lot of breastfeeding. Once she came out of the room and said, "You little freak, you've been breastfeeding for 6.5 hours." It went from, zoom, 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 we're going to the moon. She just loved that kid, to calling him a little freak because he just breastfed for about 6.5 hours. Anyway, she's well endowed. But you see, and he was also into I Dream of Jeannie. Well, it might not be because he thought he was, could be because she was kind of endowed for a little while. But he's certainly a boy now, and he identifies as a boy. Children go through this. They pass through this. And the ones that don't, I certainly think, parents should be open to a lot of things and listen and understand and let the kids vent and give input only when the child really needs input. Sometimes they just want to vent, but the parent is there for guidance. When children start smoking pot very young, their brains are not developed. And that part, the prefrontal cortex, is who you are, is your personality, is the way you can see yourself. If there's something wrong or something amiss, you might have encountered people who have lost their minds and are crazy, and they really can't see things for what they are. They can't see how they're presenting themselves to the world, and they seem quite off. What happens is, that is the thing that we need the prefrontal cortex developed so you can give yourself self-critical analysis. That's what gets diminished. Also, they've also found smoking pot at a young age. That's what also brings out latent schizophrenia. And they also have difficulty with intimate relationships. So smoking pot at a very young age, because the brain is still growing, and it takes about 7 days for the drug to leave your body. It stays in your body. If you smoke it once, it takes about a whole week for that to leave your body. That's why it's very important that we really should dissuade children from smoking so young. As fun as it can be, there's a reason for it, because we don't want it. The brain is so important. I always thought to myself that, I don't want to do any of that because I don't want to harm my brain. My brain it's the most important thing. And when you observe people as they get older, they get dementia, and then you lose who you are. You don't remember. It's a very sad thing when you observe someone with dementia. So the brain is very fragile. Whatever we do, we need to feed it good things and good literature and good words and good works and good deeds, good thoughts, for it to truly develop. A brain can also be stifled because of stress. To say if the child actually is being abused, that stress will prevent the brain from growing. So it's so important that that we're emphasizing these crazy things. That's why my campaign is to make America sane again, because we really are losing our minds. We really can't. The road that we're going down by saying that a child can pick their gender at a young age. Now, it should be that if they are going to change their gender, certainly go through puberty. Don't give them hormones. And that would be the best thing for them if you really feel that your child really wants this. And there's a study that most people don't know about. 28% of the people who have gone through the surgery are actually going back because they want it reversed. This is something that is not being publicized. So the idea is, they say that, it's because it's really your soul, it's really who you are. You're really born a particular sex, even though you're in the wrong body. But if 28% of the people are going back, that would have to be that 28% of them actually changed their mind. And it wasn't that, it was because that it was really who they are inside, underneath all the male chromosomes, made up of either male or female chromosomes, underneath all that. So in some cases, yes. In fact, if 28% go back, that means they've changed their minds. And the idea is that we don't want the children to commit suicide because they have to be a different sex, when the percentage of suicide is 40% of transgenders, even transgenders who have gone through the surgery, and those who are accepted in society as their new sex. There's still a 40% rate of suicide. I know Ben Shapiro talks about this an awful lot, and he's absolutely right. So if you really care about suicide, LGBTQ community does not want this new statistic to be out. You see, if you care, if your predominant thing is caring about suicide, that you do not want these people to end up committing suicide, what about the 28% that need to be changed back? Realize that they have essentially mutilated their body. I mean, after you cut the genitals and you do all that stuff, I've seen that whole thing and I've checked it out. You've already mutilated it. And then if you change it back again, it's never going to be the same. And the most important part is not only to express who you really are. By cutting yourself, it changes something. By needing to take hormones make you female hormones make you very emotional. They do. And you need to take these hormones every single day. And if you don't, you can get thrown into an emotional spin. By taking the hormones away, giving the hormones, taking the hormones away, not being able to get the hormones every day. They have to actually have that prescription all the time. That's why it's very difficult for someone to be in the army and needing these, because sometimes they're away from camp, and they need these hormones. So it's difficult in many, many ways. So the people who want to change back and they have regret, and some of the community and the left is pushing them aside. They're leaving them out to dry. They're pushing them into changing. In fact, they want more people to change their genders than would change their genders if they just kind of grew up. And sometimes in a few years you grow out of it. They're pushing them into doing this at a very, very young age. Blair White speaks very well of this. Blair White is a transgender, and she was once a male, and she's phenomenal to watch because I can't think of her as anything but a woman. And definitely there are cases that, yes, your soul really does, you truly are a woman. I know that there's conservatives that would disagree and say you can never call this person a woman, but there's so much about her, and she's actually very beautiful to watch. There's something very sweet about her. And, so there are cases, and she speaks up for that you must be old enough. And if your brain does not fully develop to the age of 26, if you're going to do that surgery, it's like I said, I can see there are cases, like Blair White, I can see there are cases that this person truly is a woman. Like I said, is a delight to watch. It is best to wait till you're older. I'm afraid that we've got an awful lot of parents and an awful lot of adults who have damaged their brains, at a young age. Possibly, maybe you can smoke some pot, but don't smoke too much. Be very, very, very careful. We're pushing drugs too freely in society. They're not being taken with care. And I'm afraid that might be one of the problems, or the problem, why people are trying to identify their race as well as their sex at such a young age. And they're pushing away common sense. They use the word common sense. The left use the common sense. Oh yes, of course, who could be against common sense, gun laws? They're actually against common sense. And common sense says that you must be fully developed. Your brain must be fully developed. And you cannot damage it at a young age. And unfortunately, pot, when it first came out, like when the monkeys smoked it, it was actually not as strong, and it's much stronger now. It's much more dangerous. I remember George Carlin said once that he used to smoke pot all the time, but he got off of it. He stopped, and then he would take one hit, and then he would type away, and he would have this comic genius, and he would be totally politically incorrect today. I went to one of his last shows, and he said something, oh God, I won't even repeat it, but there were some ladies in the audience that just didn't like what he said. But he was brilliant, and he hit the nail on the head. And if he was alive today, and if Christopher Hitchens was alive today, we'd be a lot saner. I swear to God. I know Christopher Hitchens was. I mentioned God. But this is, and also you get, George Carlin says that you get a much stronger high. You need just a tiny, tiny bit to achieve this effect that you want to achieve. And it also opened up his pathways to be very creative. So maybe let's start taking less pot, and we need some sane adults to counsel the other adults. First, to counsel the other adults, because it seems like they're the biggest problem, because children are children, and children need guidance, and they need sane adults to give them guidance. And if a child is being bullied, most likely they're being abused at home. So if that's the factor, this gentleman talking to Tucker Carlson, if that's the factor, then schools have to be a little more aware. I know when I was a child, they were not aware of anything at all. And that was very sad. Causes a lot of problems. But anyway, I'm going to sign off now because it's 30 minutes and I don't want to talk too long. But let's bring sanity back to America. And we have to fight for this, because common sense and logic and rationale is being taken away. And I think one of the biggest problems, they vilified alcohol, which actually leaves the body through liquid. It exits the body. Pot stays in the body. I said one hit will stay in your body for 7 days. We do need to stop taking as much drugs as we do, and we do need to withhold it from the young. We have to be very careful, because they are developing minds, they're developing bodies, developing souls, and we must not destroy them. And I'm afraid that our society, the left, is gone off the rails. It's destroying the most precious thing that we have. And your race is precious. No matter what race you are, you should celebrate it. All races are beautiful. Good night. And please let me know in the comments below what you think. Thank you for listening. Good night.